Welcome to episode 1 of our 3-episode highlight series produced in the depths of the global pandemic. Each highlight episode focuses on a topic. This episode features guests from the series in our small business sector. When COVID-19 hit, we created this series to spotlight the small businesses supporting our community, giving them a platform to share their services and struggles during an unprecedented crisis. 5 years on, with local businesses still facing immense pressures, we're revisiting these powerful stories to honor their resilience and continued fight for survival. Today, Associate Producer Eric Estrada takes you through these unforgettable conversations.
Our first voice is Julie Cowles, District Director of Small Business Administrations for the San Francisco District Office.
That's a great segue into one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show was we had, for lack of a better term, CARES Act 2, right, roll out finally on December 27th. And now it includes more funds for nonprofit small businesses. There's a whole shuttered venue, which means a lot for some of the folks that have been in the show, like Z-Space, for example, or Music at Cole Mansion. So could you walk the audience through what are some of the programs? And I think everybody's heard about the PPP program, but there is and everyone loves acronyms, EIDL, and then an EIDL Advanced or /Target. Could you walk us through what are some of the programs right now that are available? And then we'll segue into some of the common issues that you've seen folks struggle with.
Sure, absolutely. There is a myriad of programs out there right now. Some are programs you might have been familiar with this past summer, and others are new. So I like to break them into two different categories of programs, one being like debt deferment and relief programs, and the other bucket being loans and grants. One of the things that gets very little attention, and I think is a tremendous benefit, is the SBA debt relief program. That's actually where SBA is paying principal and interest payments on existing SBA debt holders. So they could be through our 7A program, our 504, or even our micro lending program. So from when the CARES Act was first introduced in March, the program, I think, launched in April of 2020, and we were able to pay 6 months worth of principal and interest payments for these businesses. So this is better than a deferment, right? This is an actual payment. That program has been reauthorized and refunded with the most recent legislation from December. And so we are reopening that program to pay additional months for existing debt holders. And then there's also going to be a pathway for some new debt holders to enroll, and also some people that fit targeted parameters, smaller businesses, minority owned, et cetera, will also have additional options to have additional payments made on their debt as well. But talking about the loans and the grant programs, obviously, Paycheck Protection Program has received probably the most press, but it is not the only program. And I dare say for some businesses, it's not even the best program for them. It's maybe not the best fit. But that one is now available, open. Any participating lender can submit applications to SBA. The unique twist this time around is that it's open not only for people to apply for their very first PPP loan, but if you had already received a PPP loan in 2020 and you meet the new criteria, you can also apply for a second PPP loan. To apply for your second PPP loan, we are going to look at some additional eligibility criteria. We're trying to target the hardest hit businesses. So it includes not only being an eligible entity, of which a lot more nonprofits are now eligible as well. So that's good news. You have to also have 300 or less employees, and you also have to show a reduction in your gross receipts between 2019 and 2020. So the second PPP loan is an option for many businesses, but there is going to be an additional demonstration of the need for those businesses. So that, again, open for any participating lender, is now available to submit applications. The EIDL program, or Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, was the first program out the gate in March of 2020 and continues. It remains open for people to apply for their first time. Fortunately, at this time, there's no ability to apply for a second loan, but any first-time applicants can still apply. The difference between this one and the PPP is that it is a working capital loan. So it can be used for pretty much any business expenses, where PPP is obviously focused on payroll, although you can use it for some other authorized expenses. The EIDL program is really working capital for any of your business expenses, including payroll. And that one is a loan. It does not have a forgiveness component like the PPP program, but it is on very favorable terms. So 3.75% interest for small businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits with an automatic 30-year term. So that is a loan you would apply for directly from SBA on our website. And then we have two new programs that are coming down the pike that are both grants. So the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant is starting to get some publicity. And that is something that's not yet open for anybody to apply, but we do have a lot of information available on our website, the sba.gov. And we will continue to be putting information out about that. It is a brand new program, so it does take a little bit of implementation before we launch, but there is enough information on our website. I think you can go in, see if you think you qualify for it, and then how to calculate how much you might be eligible for under this program. So again, you can start getting some information so that if you qualify, you can start to make decisions about whether this program or one of the other programs might be best suited for your needs for your business. The Targeted EIDL Advance is the other one that is similarly named to the EIDL Advance that was available in the summer of 2020 until it ran out of funding. But I do like to point out to people that it really is a different program. So the Economic Aid Act that was passed in December created this. I would say it's maybe a cousin of the EIDL Advance program that was available this past summer. So it is a program that is not open for applications just yet, but I do encourage businesses to go and look at the website, again, sba.gov, and start to look at the parameters about how this program is going to come available when it is. It's going to open in phases. And you will see that this Targeted EIDL Advance Grant is only available for businesses that meet certain criteria. So the low income areas and showing the revenue reduction again between 2019 and 2020. SBA will actually be messaging a lot of our prior EIDL Advance recipients and or applicants before the funding ran out. So I do want people to go read the details to see how this program is expected to be unveiled and know that if they had applied for an EIDL Advance in the summer in 2020 and maybe did not get the full $10,000, they should receive a direct message from SBA with further instructions related to the Targeted EIDL Advance. And then similarly, if they applied for the EIDL Advance, but the funding ran out before we were able to make an award to them, those individuals and businesses will also be messaged directly. So there's still a lot happening. There's a lot that's available. Today, you could apply for the EIDL program, the EIDL loan. You could also apply for a PPP loan, whether it's your first one or your second one. The two grant programs, though, are not yet open for applications.
Next on the program is Tim Russell, Program Director, and Sharon Miller, Chief Executive Officer of the Renaissance Entrepreneurship Center.
With coming up on 10 months now plus of being in this lovely meltdown situation, and I would consider the meltdown to be both a financial meltdown as well as a health and safety meltdown. And so many of these entrepreneurs are sole proprietors, for example. What are some of the needs that you're seeing out there for these small, some of them micro enterprises, some mid-scale businesses? And I'm going to turn back to you, Tim, to answer this question, then go to Sharon. But what are you seeing are some of the biggest needs? Is it financing? Is it mentorship?
I think at the onset of the pandemic, I had a conversation with Sharon and I said, hey, Sharon, they need funding. They need money like right now. They are losing their properties. They are losing their sales. We did a survey that I believe Sharon will just talk about a little bit deeper, where we realized from the entrepreneurs and the small businesses themselves that they had lost so much in revenue. They did not have the necessary tools in place to be able to pivot themselves the way they felt like they needed to. So we felt like the needs were funding at the top, technology a close second, if not a 1A. And then just that technical assistance. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs just needed that constant reminder and encouragement that you can make it, you can make it, you can make it. So we became not only small business support staff for them, but we almost became therapists, business therapists to let them know you can make it. Okay, just breathe, because you're going to make it. And you know what? It worked. And small businesses were able to show resiliency because of realizing that they were stronger than they thought.
Sharon, same question. And I would love to find out from you some of the output from your survey of small businesses.
Sure. We knew quickly that everyone was in crisis. And, way back in March, no one thought we would be here at this time. I remember having conversations and thinking like, oh, we're going to be back at work in May. Well, May when is now the question. So we decided to conduct a survey to find out what was going on with our clients and really hoping that maybe someone would give us an idea that we hadn't thought of. But what we found was, unfortunately not surprising that people did not have financial reserves. It's not unusual for a small business to put one foot in front of the next and not necessarily have enough money put away for a crisis. We found, as Tim said, they needed cash. They still had bills. They were deeply committed to their employees and wanted to support them. And they couldn't necessarily figure out what they needed initially to say, I have a service business. I do puppet shows. That's what I do. People come and see my puppet shows, and then they come and they make puppets because they see how fun they are. Well, how can we help you to pivot that idea and say, let's see if we can figure out puppet making kits, online puppet shows. But you often need to talk that through to someone because you've had your vision for your business very clearly structured. We also found that the digital divide is huge, that 40% of our clients were using cell phones for all of their technology needs. So that just doesn't work. If you need to create a website and you need to do e-commerce and people need to find you, your cell phone is just not enough. We even found that in our classes, you can't do a spreadsheet on your cell phone. So that there was such a disadvantage that people had, and they didn't know where to start. So what we did is we looked at ways we could fill those gaps. We were able to get Chromebooks for people who didn't have computers. We were able to help people by building websites for them, teaching social media, teaching them how to do online sales, how to do e-commerce. So those were just big gaping needs that we were able to see and fill.
Up next is Pierre Cordial, Director of Advising and Education of SF Made.
Can you share a story with how SF Made is helped incubate someone like Michelle and Anna Joe's to bring them to market? And part of that would be, what do you feel like has been the largest impact of SF Made on small manufacturers, makers, our local economy? The whole multiplier of someone like Michelle's work is all of the people she hires as well. And I think people lose track of that.
So there are two things, how we've helped companies like Nana Joe's in the past and during COVID. They're pretty different things. Before COVID, the biggest impact was probably when we can help with direct hires, with especially people with barriers to employment, like formerly homeless or formerly incarcerated, or when we can make sure that a manufacturer can grow in the city. Like our biggest success story of the past 2 years is chocolate manufacturer Charles Chocolates, who found a larger production space that they could still afford in the same neighborhood that tripled the size of their space, which we're super happy that this could happen and we could keep them in the city. Or when I mentioned advising projects, when we can actually help a manufacturer with huge efficiency gains, like a decrease in lead times and increase in volumes. These are the success stories that we use who really care for the most. And the biggest overall impact, both before and during the pandemic, is that it's about creating a network of manufacturers, like giving a voice to the manufacturing sector, to the city, our funders, everyone, hopefully the public, and then really helping manufacturers know and talk to each other and often partner with each other, which we're always super happy to see. During COVID, the main thing is we were a source of information, like filtering the information applicable, was the programs applicable, the help applicable to manufacturers large and small. There were so many local and government programs for everyone, every business, that we were the voice of manufacturers. I mean, hopefully that's what we want it to be. And also helping you protect your employees and your business by finding capital. A good example is we helped Nana Joe's get a PPP loan, talk to the city to help create the health and safety rules so manufacturers in general could reopen quickly and safely. In addition to our staff specializing in some areas, like our Director of Workforce, Claire Michaels, knew all the details that the FFCRA, all the workforce programs, and also the local ones, many programs that could help manufacturers. And I was the person keeping track of all the loan and grant programs, in particular, all the many changes around the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program loan that basically transformed into a grant if you met all the criteria. In addition to that, we've always been working with employment and tax lawyers, with bankers, with lots of professionals that are ready to help pro bono and that we called on often during the pandemic. We're trying to be a voice for manufacturers and bringing all the advice that they might need at all times, especially during a pandemic. One thing that I wanted to mention, just because it's what's needed right now, we have been able to help, especially accessing capital, reopening, and right now trying to sell more direct and online. But right now, even though most manufacturers seem to be able to survive through the pandemic, most need capital, and now it's becoming urgent. And so they need another government stimulus package or some kind of capital to survive, especially the winter. You have to consider that many manufacturers will make 50 to 70% of their annual revenue in the last 2 or 3 months of the year. And right now, no one knows what's going to happen because there are no direct events. There's very little corporate buying for the holidays, but no one really knows what to produce in preparation for the holidays and what to expect.
Joining us now are Amanda Freed, Chief of Policy and Communications, Treasurer for the City and County of San Francisco, and Adam Fowler, Founding Partner of CVL Economics.
Thank you, Tracy. And Amanda, turning to you, and I'm going to have both you and Adam provide us, if you will, kind of the data behind the COVID-19 impact on our small business community, both in San Francisco and on the region. So I know some of it's looking backwards because as we were talking before we came on, we're still trying to gather information for the most recent quarter.
Yeah. So from our data, so typically we collect, all businesses have to register with us, their business registration certificate. They pay a tax for that every year. And so that's usually a source of data that economists and others really sort of rely on to understand how many businesses are open or closed in San Francisco at any given time. To give some context, there's usually about 100,000 businesses registered with us. And in a typical year, if you look in 2019, about 13,000 businesses closed. In the past year, so since COVID started, since March 17th of 2020, we've only actually seen about 6,000 businesses come in and tell us they're closed. Now, we know that is not reality. There are many more businesses that have closed, and honestly, we're the last on their list, and we understand that. There's, so much going on right now. So our data is a little bit limited. We typically collect it because we send a tax bill, and then the business says, no, we're not in operation anymore, and that's how we know. We just had our first deadline in almost a year. So April 30th, we had our business registration and annual business tax deadline, and those were both deferred from 2020. So, we anticipate that as we sort of go and say, hey, you didn't file, that we'll see that number start to tick up, and that's a pretty gross underestimate. And so we try to caveat with everybody that usually uses our data that this isn't what you should rely on to share information about what's going on with businesses right now. That said, the board and the mayor passed some small business relief where businesses, who were under 25 million in gross receipts in San Francisco and who were mandated to close for any portion of the COVID crisis could have a lot of their taxes waived for the year. We've had about 12,000 businesses come through that process and tell us that they qualify. And so their bills were brought to zero. And again, we expect that number will increase, that businesses were sort of aware, I think I got this, so they might not have filed on time. And that's fine. We really, we encourage businesses to come in sooner rather than later. The last thing you want is sort of annoying, pesky, delinquent collection notices. But I do want to stress that if businesses qualify for this relief, even though they've missed the deadline, they should still come in. They will still qualify. We will still bring their bill down to zero. So, that's still available to businesses. And we are working with folks, Tracy mentioned shared spaces. We're working very closely with that team as they look at sort of the future of that program to make sure that, we're able to give small businesses a 50% fee waiver for future and think about how we bill and collect that. So it's the least annoying possible. I think we all wish that we could not charge for most things that we do. But if we do have to charge, we're looking forward to, taking what we learned through the pandemic about sort of how do we identify a small business and sort of proactively bring their bill down, right size it, and then sort of build it in with other things that they're used to paying. So a lot of businesses pay an annual license fee with a bunch of departments. So we're adding shared spaces to that. So it's not like another bill that you get at some time that you weren't expecting. But that's pretty much what we know at this point. I'll pass it on to Adam.
There we go. And Adam, give us the more macro 9-county kind of view. And then I think also it would be helpful for listeners just, statewide, because Beacon is doing a great job on a statewide basis as far as giving us data.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's one thing that really stood out in Amanda's comments that I would echo in a number of different economic indicators. And the fact that there are probably businesses that are closed and that we simply don't know about. So back in really April of 2020, one of the first things that we noticed in the national monthly unemployment releases was that an overwhelming majority of folks were saying they were temporarily furloughed. And that number has remained exceedingly high throughout the pandemic. A lot of good economists, including members of our team, have dove into the micro data. And we're convinced that a lot of folks continually are in a state of suspended animation, right? So early on, I remember clearly the presentations I was doing in January and February of 2020. I was talking about job openings exceeding those folks looking for employment, a talent crunch. I think had been in the third year of seeing some wage increases across the board, meaning talent was for the first time in a while driving up kind of wage demands. And so in terms of the macro indicators coming into the pandemic, we were in a good position. Our forecast was moderate growth for the year. And so if you were to freeze the economy at that point in time, across a lot of, again, macro metrics, the economy was in good shape. The novel nature of this kind of external shock really ties into this conversation. And I think frustrations, economists, small business owners, myself as a staff member and a small business have felt. The idea that this was an airborne virus, a novel virus we didn't know a lot of the science about, was actually a decent amount of information where policy could have been much more targeted. Hindsight, of course, is 2020, but the nature of the spread early on told us what kinds of sectors were going to be the first impacted in terms of putting them on ice. And from a public policy point of view, targeting and trying to hold our economy, the parts of it that were a part of the pandemic, the epidemiological kind of unfolding narrative, would have been really pragmatic. The idea that we could have kept folks tethered to their small businesses, tethered to their employers, but temporarily put on ice and resources directed toward them to come back out, to kind of pick back up where we left off, would have been really ideal. Politics, policymaking, a lot of other things at the national level kind of got in the way. And so people were without a lot of good information as they were reporting out, not only on small business pulse surveys put in the field by the U.S. Census, but even in the monthly employment numbers, talking about they were temporarily furloughed when in fact, the restaurant owner might not have flagged that they were going to close up for good. And so data has been a little bit wonky in that sense. Another thing I would flag that I think people forget about is this is the first recession that's driven by services. Normally during a downturn, haircuts remain stable, funerals remain stable, local service activities are really quite stable. Just the opposite this time. Because those were taken offline for public health reasons, we've seen a service and a set of industry downturn that are different than our normal downturns. If you think about economic downturns that are a function of kind of the system itself, so the Great Recession, that was overheating within the sectors itself. And this was an external shock this time around. And so for the first time since we've collected data, we saw a service sector downturn. At the same time, another interesting thing to think about is in all of our geographies, both in California and across the U.S., we're an aging population, and healthcare and healthcare services are a big part of our both GDP and our local state GSP, gross state products. So early on in the pandemic, right, what did we do? We kicked a lot of, dental cleanings, non-necessary surgeries, things like that down the road. We said, we need all hands on deck. We need these emergency rooms to gear up for people. And so one of the biggest parts of our GDP were thrown into a loop. Again, during normal downturns, healthcare is normally unfazed, especially in an economy that's aging the way ours is. And so we've had a couple very unique things that have driven the headline numbers. So thinking back to Q2 of last year, a 30% annualized drop in GDP. That was misleading in a number of ways in terms of comparing it to previous downturns, because a lot of it was where the activity was taking place. Now, on the flip side of that are a lot of small businesses that, especially in leisure, hospitality, restaurants, retail trade, that are smaller parts of the GDP picture. So as we're talking about the new, roaring 20s and coming out of this, both things can be true because of the just size of the economy that is tied up in things like healthcare, things like other activities, but not necessarily the small parts that are entertainment, leisure, hospitality, and restaurants. So those can still be struggling at the same time. We're seeing really gangbusters in terms of macroeconomic activity. The final thing worth flagging, especially to our downtown corridors, our small businesses, is the rise in the method of spending. So there's been wonderful research from all of the larger banking institutions following debit card purchases after the stimulus rollout a couple of different times throughout last year and this year. And what we see is spending, but not spending at smaller mom and pop retail operations. There was a lot of spending activity that was via the stimulus mechanisms of those checks, but a lot of it went to online big platforms. And so where there might have been a diversity of consumer spending for folks in our urban metros, that shifted into a couple big players and was captured in people's spending behavior. And so you've got a couple different things happening at once. And so for our local kind of retail downtown corridors, they've got some challenges. We can talk about retail numbers exceeding their forecasted metrics, and we've been seeing that for the last couple of months. But then when you dive in, unpack that record-breaking number, you see, it's not all as it was before. That spending is being moved into some different plumbing than it was before the pandemic. So there's still a lot of challenges for kind of our business ecosystem as we thought about it before the pandemic, looking like or coming back or, resetting. I think the length of this pandemic has really shifted some thinking. I think early on there was an idea that this was a rubber band that would snap right back. And I think the length of this has really changed some business models for the long term.
You're listening to Voices of the Community. In our first half, we've explored the critical needs for funding, overcoming the technology gap, and adapting business models. Our thanks to our incredible guests, Julie Cowles, Tim Russell, Sharon Miller, Pierre Cordial, Amanda Freed, and Adam Fowler. Thank you for listening to Voices of the Community. Shows like this depend on your generous support. To help us continue these vital conversations, please visit georgecoster.com and click the donate button to make your tax-deductible contribution. We appreciate your support. Now let's hear from our second half guests. Coming up next are the voices of our digital marketing and business panel, featuring the voices of Tracy Howick, owner of All Good Pizza, Tato and Cafe Alma, Rebecca Bertoli from Rebecca Bertoli Marketing, and Pooja Rajani, Director of Programs at Into Action.
I want to turn back to Kristen, and really for all three of our business experts, I know all of you view business as both a social enterprise as well as just business. So that whole model or idea for our listening audience and our participants today, working with nonprofits and small business. Can you walk us through, Kristen, some of the things that you've done? Because in our past conversations, one of the unique parts of what you've done, especially at All Good, was it's really a community center versus just a place to get a pizza.
So a lot of my associations with different nonprofits, I've been in the nonprofit world in San Francisco. I used to run an organization that helped women start small businesses, primarily in Guatemala and Chiapas, Mexico. But many of them were food producers or artisans. So I was connected to the nonprofit world, but a lot of it just really honestly came from like personal passion. So like I mentioned earlier, I've been a resident of Baby Hunters Point for over 20 years. And I just really love this community a lot. I felt like there were a lot of unique organizations that were working to preserve the diversity and the integrity of the community. And it was important to me when I moved here to be really involved in the neighborhood. And one of the things after being here for a few years that I noticed was there wasn't a lot of like public gathering space in this community. So when I sought out to start this restaurant, I knew that it had to have some component of community place, essentially. And that's why I ended up in an abandoned parking lot of all things. But it really did allow me the opportunity to build this really unique spot where other nonprofits in the community and other organizations, I work with schools. We do a lot of support for different schools in the area. I work with other San Francisco-based organizations. We've got a big open space where people can gather. And it's really been, a mission of that business to offer that space to people and to be a community hub in many ways, not even related to the food. I work with other restaurants. I'm really active with other restaurants in the neighborhood for them to sell their food from my location. So again, it's networking and it's really mutual support of other businesses and trying to find ways for people to connect in that way.
Thank you. Good example.
Something real quick to that?
Sure. Please go ahead.
I think that people forget that these small businesses, we're the ones that are sponsoring your sports teams, that are helping with school things, fundraisers, that are giving back to the community all the time. And those things really do stand out. And it's because we're proud of our community, but definitely use it to your advantage in your marketing because you are the ones that are making a difference. So make sure you're using it.
Thank you. And Pooja, turning to you, you and Andrea were a for-profit, and then you guys did a proverbial reverse merger. You merged into a nonprofit. So share with us a little bit about that, but also I know you and Andrea have worked for a long time inside the whole Southeast community of San Francisco to bring together business and nonprofits.
Thanks, George. So before Interaction was founded from the for-profit Andrea Baker Consulting, it was a lot of the work that Andrea Baker Consulting did was focused around community outreach and doing community engagement and community events and placemaking. And so just to increase the impact, again, as you said, we launched the nonprofit Interaction. And a lot of the work that we did involved doing community events, neighborhood marketplaces that focused hyperlocal businesses and also showcased entrepreneurs and put together like people, artists, and products together to create a sense of community as well as give a sense of there's something happening in the neighborhood. And I think the pandemic, if anything, has only showcased how important open spaces and community and people are, and collaboration is so important. And so I think we have continued that work by continuing to do like community events. I know events were shut down for COVID, but I think people are now starting to do more community marketplaces. During the pandemic for Baby Bistro, the Baby Bistro boxes we donated, a lot of the consumers would say, hey, like, we don't want the box, but they would purchase the box and we would give it to the community member or like a family in need. So we also did that part of the pandemic. And then a lot of our programs are centered around connecting businesses with resources and supporting their needs in the neighborhood as well as like with the city and with, I think, SBDC, just connecting them. So I think we've continued that work. We're trying to provide opportunities for these small businesses to connect with people, to build an audience, grow their business, learn what the community needs, and really thrive.
Coming up next is Lori Thomas, Executive Director for the Golden Gate Restaurant Association.
Given the situation, a lot of restaurants have been forced to shut down and trying to struggle to come back. How can people who are watching or listening to this help their local restaurant in their neighborhood and or restaurants at large in San Francisco?
So a couple of things. So certainly order takeout. If you're healthy and if you can make it, go to the restaurant, pay and pick it up and go home or go to a park or wherever. That's preferable. All the money stays in the hands of the restaurant. You're not paying a commission for the food to get to you. That's first and foremost. I think a lot of restaurants did GoFundMe campaigns because it was a way where they could get support from the community that supports us. And then all of us, most of us anyway, paid those funds out to their workers, especially to help folks that maybe couldn't take advantage of the unemployment insurance options in our community. Unfortunately, we had that concern. So I think that was really a big win. I know that our customers were super supportive, and we were able to write significant checks to all of our employees. So that was one good way to do it. The other way is some folks are doing gift cards, whether they're donation type things, like a war bond kind of idea where you buy a bond and then doesn't turn out that that place is around, whatever it was a donation. People are doing that. And then I think going forward, when we can do dine out, I know it's going to be a little cold in San Francisco, but if everyone can sort of tough it out and go sit on the patio and try to support the local restaurants, that'd be great. And then on a last note, I think being willing to support the restaurants and put your money where your mouth is important. And I think you're going to see prices go up. We've all lost a lot of money and costs are gone up. You've seen the food cost has already gone up. So just to cover the food costs alone, but to continue to try to operate, I think you are going to see some price increases.
In our prior conversation, the association is not a nonprofit.
We are a nonprofit, but we're a trade nonprofit, not a charitable nonprofit.
Right. So people can't make a donation to the Golden Gate Restaurant Association, for example.
They could, but it would not be deductible right now. So what we're going to try to focus on is we realized that we do have a scholarship organization, a 501c3 that's a scholarship, but that we can't really pivot. It has to stay in the scholarship realm. So what we're going to try to do is focus on developing a 501c3 for future disasters, if you will. So we have a way to do that. You know, I would say the city's done a really good job of establishing the Give to San Francisco Fund. And there's 3 pillars to that fund. And the third pillar or arm of that is to support small businesses and workers. And so if folks are still looking to write a check, they can do that. They can go to Give to San Francisco and do it that way. That's one thing that's in existence, and that's been helpful locally.
What we also talked about was the idea that possibly the federal government might come up with another round of PPP that conceivably business associations could go after for funding.
Yeah, so the feds, we need money from the feds. Everybody write your senators, particularly the Republican senators, and tell them to vote for what the House just approved last week, which is part of the CARES Act. And that was a well-meaning plan that was passed bipartisan, like a month ago now, that provided for funds. The first tranche, a lot of us didn't get them, but the second tranche, more small businesses got them. And some of the larger chains pulled back, gave the money back. So those funds had problems for restaurants because in order to get the full forgivability of the loan, you had to bring everybody back to the same level of employment within 8 weeks. And many of us are still closed, particularly in New York and San Francisco, right? And LA is just starting to open. So you couldn't really bring anybody back, right? And 75% of that loan had to be spent on bringing people back to that same level. So it wasn't really as usable as a lot of people needed. So what this fix does is extends that period to 24 weeks. It turns the loan into a 5-year loan versus a 2-year loan. And it would allow you to spend more of that money on rent, for example. But the Senate has to pick that up and approve that, and we'll see what happens.
Now, let's hear more from Kristen Howick, owner of All Good Pizza, Tato, and Cafe Alma.
So how has COVID-19 impacted the production of all your restaurant operations?
Oh, it's horrible. I mean, prior to COVID-19, my biggest joy is being in the kitchen and cooking, but I also felt like every day it was like hosting a party. And so, of course, with the shutdown, we lost that sense of community, really. I think all 3 of my restaurants really operate as sort of community centers in a way. And I think most restaurants do. Yeah, it's been terrible. We've been really fortunate to be able to pivot to some other activities, but I really miss the community. I really miss being able to host. All 3 of my locations have operated as a host to other small businesses as well. I love doing pop-ups with other entrepreneurs and people who are like just getting started or people who have a small business but don't necessarily want a brick and mortar location. That was such a big part of all 3 of these locations. And COVID-19, of course, has shut that down. I feel very fortunate that we're even still in existence because I know so many of the restaurateurs and friends that I work with across various organizations that I'm involved with have not been able to survive. So it's really a dire time for restaurants in general. And, we have not been free of that. unfortunately.
So would you say your idea of being community-centric, of being a little community gathering point, is that one of the biggest impacts you feel like you've had in the Bayview community over the years? Or is it providing jobs?
Yeah, I think it's, a little bit of both. I do hire local, but I think All Good Pizza, you've been there, so it's a pretty big space. It's 7,000 square feet of outdoor space, which is really unique for San Francisco. And I've really been able to utilize that to provide a venue essentially for community organizations, community activities, even down to some of the political stuff that's happened. We even had events for London Breed and all kinds of people. So having that outdoor space has been really incredible, I think, for the community. And it's allowed me to be generous in offering that space as well. We host a farmer's market there, which we've now taken virtual. We've done a ton of art fairs and different events. We've done a lot of pop-ups with other local businesses and vendors and entrepreneurs. And it's really been an incredible space for the Bayview community. So yeah, I think that is definitely the primary impact. But I do hire local, and I do, again, love to utilize local resources. So I think it's also been a showcase for some of the businesses that sort of operate behind the scenes. Because, in Bayview, we're pretty isolated. We don't have a legitimate grocery store. We don't have a lot of the services that many other communities benefit from. So I think sometimes even companies like Molinari Salami, which are so well known, people don't know that they're in the Bayview. So it's nice to be able to highlight someone like them and say, hey, this is made right here for decades. And now you're able to eat their pepperoni or their salami or their prosciutto on a pizza. So I guess that's kind of my community impact.
We now turn to Shannon Walter, manager, and Jeff Trenum, owner of Blue Plate SF.
My next question, I'm going to direct it to you, Shannon, because I know you work the front a lot. So how has COVID-19 really impacted the production of all of your wonderful food and hospitality at Blue Plate?
Well, I'd share that question with GT as everyone's on the front lines here. So how has COVID affected our operations? Drastically. It's a completely new business model. Jeff mentioned, to go back to a little bit of the fundraising that we've done, a lot of our staff from 27 folks down to about 6 and 8 of us that are working were furloughed or laid off. And so we did a fundraiser for them early on, not having it really dialed in how to transform what is a dining room into to-go restaurant. And at that point in time, we were only doing takeout and delivery. And that was mid-March after the shelter-in-place shutdown happened. And so we had to totally transform what was the normal for us, and having the carpet pulled out for anyone in any business that drastically changed it. You had to adapt.
Certainly some food that we used to love to do does not travel well or did not travel well. Some like kinds of raw fish and stuff. And so we made sure that we kept the things that we knew people really liked and that we could nail and that would travel well. And, we had to rethink our to-go containers, which we continue to do constantly. As, anytime you put a new dish in a container, you got to think about the delivery people that are picking it up, what it might knock around next to in their car, how long it might get there. There's a lot of ways that there's other companies and other businesses that assist us, but they're not really us. So we have to rely on them for their quality control, their hospitality, and whether it's couriers or online ordering platforms or any other like tech service, we're partnering with a lot of new people, different kinds of businesses, and trying to find the ones that are, that fit our personality, our respect for hospitality. And you're never done adapting to it. You're always changing. And this COVID thing it's just the restaurant industry on steroids, where every week there's a new guidance or a different change or a new opportunity for permit with parklets.
So how can folks help you besides making reservations? You have the garden open now. You've got front outdoor stuff. You've got gift cards. So how can folks listening and watching this support Blue Plate?
All of those things that you just mentioned. Gift cards are always great. When the pandemic first started, we sold a lot of them. We continue to sell some. We have a great garden in the back, which we take reservations for. There's only 5 tables, beautifully spaced, plants and night blooming fragrances. We have a couple of tables in the front street side, and we just got a permit to build over. There's a little water recapture device on the sidewalk. We got a permit to build over that. So we hope to add 4 to 6 more tables out in the front there.
as those become solid and we know that people like them, we'll begin to take reservations. But I think a lot of times some of the best things that people can do to support is call us up, and we're happy to talk on the phone about what we have available. It's great when people order over the phone or via our online ordering app, because we don't have the same revenue share as we do with the delivery option is chosen. And also, like, the whole lot of us here really likes the guests and the hospitality experience, and being so closed off from it now. We are allowed to seat inside, and there's 3 tables that we seat up to a maximum of 12 people. Usually it's like 6, maybe at the most. And for the people that are comfortable with that, we're ready to do it. And the weekends are always a good time.
Speaking with us next is Michelle Pusateri, owner of Nana Joe's Granola.
The other big question is, how has COVID impacted your operation in keeping the staff of people that you have who help make the magic at Nana Joe's?
So Community Before Profit, I started that back in, I think it was 2015, 2016. It's a website. I've been working on it, but just haven't had a lot of time. But I was noticing that a lot of people were feeling isolated and lost in the service industry. I grew up in the service industry since I was 15. I was front of the house for a very long time, moved from, being a barista back in 1987, which barista wasn't cool, to being, a waitress and then a bartender and just that party life, and I made a decision when I moved to San Francisco to get sober. And 2015, 2016, there was about 4 or 5 people who committed suicide during that time. And I think my mentality on my business, on how to treat people and how to look at people and how to really support other people in this industry, it's hard. It's isolating. There's so many places to hide when you're in the service industry. You hide behind a smile, behind the bar. Nobody knows what's happening. And I think Community Before Profit has kind of morphed into coming more towards Nana Joe's too, and being like, during the pandemic, when March 7th hit, I didn't lay off any employee. I didn't furlough any employee. I didn't lay off any employee. A lot of my employees' family members weren't working either. So I felt a huge responsibility to hold their jobs, to make sure that they were still getting paid, to do whatever I had to do to make sure that they were getting paid. So basically I went from supporting families to supporting, all 50 people. Like, I employ 10 people and most people have at least 5 people in their family. So it made that Community Before Profit a little bit more real to me, and a little bit more like, I have a responsibility when I employ somebody. I don't just employ them just for them to get the job done. I employ them to give them the tools that they need to succeed, to give them the tools they need to never have to work another entry-level job again. And to also make sure that their families and everything is supported. And one of the biggest things that came out of this pandemic for us was a sense of trust and a sense of loyalty from my employees, which I never even thought would happen. And that happened because I made that commitment right away. Okay, if we do bleed an extra $5,000, $6,000 a month on payroll for them, so we can keep everybody's hours, so we can keep everybody on payroll, so I don't have to lay anybody off, then that's what we have to do. And I said to my staff, if the ship sinks, I go down with you. And that meant that I wasn't just going to drop everybody off, which some people, yes, they had to do that. I completely understand that. But we pivoted, Pierre, and we threw something online saying, hey, at the end of this pandemic, who do you want to see standing? Do you want to see the big corporations, or do you want to see the small mom and pop companies and the family-owned companies standing at the end of this pandemic? And it drew in an influx of orders, over 400 orders in 2 days after I posted a video online about, hey, we need help. This is scary to us and we want to survive this. And I need your help to help support these families that rely on me and really want me to make a difference in their lives. And I think that that's kind of morphing back into Community Before Profit. Like, your bottom line is your bottom line. You have to have that to be able to support your employees. But your bottom line shouldn't be your base decision during a pandemic, during a crisis, during, a family catastrophe or something happening within their families. You have to look at your bottom line and make sure that your bottom line includes everybody in your business and who you've employed and around you in your community. You don't just build and then exclude your community in a hiring pool. You have to bring them in.
Lastly, we feature the voice of Andrea Baker, founder of Into Action.
So, Andrea, why did you create Bayview Bistro Project? And then how can people help the Bayview Bistro Project?
So when we first started Bayview Bistro, the intention was always to create an opportunity for our Black and Brown micro businesses through a racial and social equity lens. So we had a vacant space on 3rd Street, and our goal was how could we create an opportunity for 3 or 4 times a week for pop-ups, caterers, food trucks that, again, were primarily from the Black and Brown community to have an opportunity to be able to vend. And we thought this was a good thing because, and we worked with the Social Impact Partnership Program that SFPUC had put in. So this money did not come from SFPUC, but SFPUC was very much ahead of their time and created a program where consultants on the project support neighborhood projects. And so we got support through that program to support what we call the Bayview Bistro, open Wednesday through Saturdays, essentially. And so we started that again to give opportunity to our smaller businesses that did not have a brick and mortar space. We also hoped that through making that opportunity available, one, we could provide great technical assistance and help some of our businesses still needed some help in formalizing their businesses. And we also wanted to be able to introduce them to the larger city economy. So most of our vendors have become city suppliers, which allows them to get in the queue and hopefully get orders, catering orders and other orders through the city. So that really was what pushed us. And that was behind putting together the Bayview Bistro. Your second question was, how can people support?
Yes. How can people support? So back to Pooja's point, you've kind of commoditized and, put the food or dinner in a box ideas. So can people order online? Can they call direct? Where do they go? Since you're a nonprofit now, can people donate?
We want them to do all of those things. So thank you for that, because we say, order a Bayview Bistro box for you, your friends, your family. Order a Bayview Bistro box and give it as a gift. We are coming out with a Thanksgiving and holiday box. And over the last 6 weeks, we now have a Friday night date box. Order a date night box and give yourself a break, or order it for somebody that you love. Donate to our program. Tag your friends and tell everybody you know about us. And I do mean everybody you know about us. Call us to order for catering. We've been working with all of our vendors, and they have now created individually packaged meals because we are in COVID-19. So we're not doing buffets anymore, not at this point. One day, maybe again. But you can order catered meals from us, and we encourage you to do that. So all of those things will help our Bayview Bistro program. And always, always tag and support our vendors.
So I think 2 final questions. One, Andrew, you've been at this a long time, along with Pooja, working on the Bayview Corridor, obviously with the Mayor's Office of Workforce and Economic Development. So over your decade plus of doing this work, what would you say has been your biggest impact on small businesses and art organizations, especially along the whole Bayview District 10 corridor?
Well, I feel, George, like one of the biggest impacts we've made actually over the last 10 years for me is bringing residents, as you pointed out, and thank you for dating me. It's been more than a decade of working in the Bayview. And when we started, I feel like one of the greatest things that we did, and certainly I didn't do it alone with others as well, was getting our residents to come out and discover our small businesses, our artisan makers, our artists and our musicians. So way back when, with BPOH, we started things like Bayview Connect, which were monthly gatherings where we would host Bayview business and we would have music and an artist and that sort of stuff. So I really do feel that led from Bayview Connect. We went to Community Tuesdays with Radio Africa. I think you might even remember that. And that was an initiative that was focused on how do we bring residents out for a $10 fabulous meal. I still believe it's the best deal yet in San Francisco. And we were able to do that. And then we continued encouraging developers and city agencies. Hey, when you come into this community, you need to order from these great food and beverage businesses. You need to support our businesses so that they too can thrive. And then I think almost 6 years ago, we ended up doing the Bayview on Court event. And Bayview on Court is intended to shine a bright light on all of our Bayview artisans, our beverage makers, our artists and musicians. I really feel that for me, that is something that I've been really proud of. I think, we kind of started that effort of getting our neighbors and residents to look around and see that they had these great treasures in the neighborhood. And since then, they've been supporting them perfectly. We love that.
Our second half featured Kristen Howick, Rebecca Bertoli, Pooja Rajani, Lori Thomas, Shannon Walter, Jeff Trenum, Michelle Pusateri, and Andrea Baker shared powerful insights on creating community hubs, leveraging grassroots marketing, building collaborative networks, engaging loyal customers, and prioritizing community impact over profit, essential strategies for small business survival and transformation. Want to learn more about today's guests and their incredible organizations? Visit voicesofthecommunity.com and click on the COVID-19 and San Francisco Nonprofit Series button. There you will find details about their programs, services, volunteer opportunities, and how to support their cause with a donation. While you're on voicesofthecommunity.com, we invite you to dive deeper into the 103 episodes of the series. Each conversation offers unique insights into how nonprofit leaders navigated challenges and continued serving our community during critical times. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter to stay in the loop on upcoming shows, series, and live events. After exploring these compelling stories, please consider supporting Voices of the Community by clicking the donate button on voicesofthecommunity.com. Your donation enables us to continue sharing these essential narratives and connecting you with the organizations transforming our community.
Before we sign off, a sincere thank you for spending time with us. This program is the first of 3 highlight shows drawn from our COVID-19 coverage, a body of work that began when Bayvac Media invited us, under Paula Argoni's leadership, to co-produce SF Nonprofit Spotlight. Those 10 television episodes led us to chronicle the wider ecosystem: nonprofits, small businesses, libraries, artists, and public agencies adapting in real time. From April 2020 through January 2023, we produced 103 episodes documenting what it looked like to serve, survive, and innovate under pressure, and what communities still need from all of us today. Here's how you can keep the momentum going. Start by subscribing to the Voices of the Community podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen, so new episodes find you automatically. Next, please rate the show and share it with friends or colleagues. Your reviews and reposts markedly increase our reach, putting these voices in more ears that can act. Then subscribe to our YouTube channel for full video episodes and archives. Search YouTube for Geo Coster and click subscribe. If this storytelling serves you, please consider making a tax-deductible donation at voicesofthecommunity.com. Just click the donate button, and your contribution directly supports field reporting, editing, mixing, transcription, and distribution. It keeps community media independent and accessible. We also want to hear from you. Send feedback on today's show, propose topics, or suggest guests by emailing George at georgecoster.com. Your notes shape our editorial calendar and introduce us to new problem solvers. We could not make these shows possible without our wonderful team. Associate producer Eric Estrada for co-hosting plus his audio and video wizardry, and designer Casey Nance of Citron Studios for her visual brilliance. Thanks also to our broadcast partners, KSFP LP FM 102.5 FM in San Francisco and KPCA LP FM 103.3 FM in Petaluma, for highlighting these stories. I'm George Costner in San Francisco. Thank you for listening, supporting, and sharing. We'll meet again in part 2, which focuses on food security and basic needs. Until then, take good care and remember, your voice matters.